Okay, so we've looked at how we're going to actually handle combat while we're in it, but what about the times where we're not in combat, we're outside of it? As I talked about a little bit already, this is where we're going to be looking at attributes. Now let's drop this back down to a reasonable number. Now what we're going to do for attributes is anytime that we're doing something outside of combat against somebody else, we're going to compare attribute values. So let's say if back here, I want to arm wrestle this person out in the middle of the field. We're not fighting anymore. Well, I'm going to compare my strength attribute to their strength attribute. If my number is higher, then I'm going to be able to win in that competition. If it's the same or less, then I won't be able to. I guess in the case of like an arm wrestle, that would be like a stalemate. Neither person would be able to really win. That's for something that's a direct comparison. Other examples might be listening to someone or trying to sneak up on someone, and you might compare different values. So athletics would be done for sneaking, and I would take my skill into account here and call it a value of 8. But I would measure that against the other person's perception because they're trying to listen to me, sense whether I'm close, that kind of thing, to know if I'm sneaking up on them. But again, it's just a comparison. Is my athletics higher than their perception? Now there's things we can do that are against the environment instead of a person. If I want to say pull this tree out of the ground, well, that's going to be extremely hard, but maybe there's a small tree that I'm trying to rip out of the ground. It's still going to be looking at my strength score, but it's not a comparison to the tree. It's actually going to be a comparison, now if we look here, just to the world. And what is that value from the world going to be? Well, it's going to be chosen by the game master, and this little table gives a good idea of how skilled somebody is going to have to be in order to accomplish that task. So an attribute value of 5 denotes the average attribute for a human. So if you think an average human could complete the task, is it a very small tree that I'm trying to rip out of the ground? Well, then you would only need a 5 in order to do it. 10 represents the highest capability a human can achieve reasonably. So you're talking like, power lifters, you're talking athletes at this point, as skilled as you can get. And as you go beyond 10, which you'll see later on how to do, you can have these kinds of superhuman attributes, accomplish things that a human would not be able to do normally. Now, this is a good example of some kinds of things that you can do, what you should expect. So like lifting stuff, throwing stuff for strength, dodging, sneaking is going to be one against people, jumping between platforms, what are you going to be able to perceive, all that kind of stuff. You can use this as kind of a guiding tool as a game master to understand what you should expect from the players. Now, beyond what's here in attributes, there's 2 other things that I think are really worth focusing on. The first one of those is going to be how smart is your character versus how smart are you as a player. So knowledge is not how smart you are. Knowledge is how much information you can retain. So are you good at remembering history? Well, that would fall into knowledge, but are you a good problem solver? Well, that's like an intelligence kind of thing, and that's going to be up to the player. If the player wants to play a character that is just as intelligent as them, then they can just try to solve problems as they see fit to the best of their ability, and they shouldn't feel hampered by a low knowledge score if that's what they have. Of course, if a player wants to play a player, or a character rather, that is not a very good problem solver, maybe they're a bumbling idiot, well, that's completely fine too. They can role play that as that kind of character. Now, if they want to go kind of beyond their own intelligence, you can have that conversation with the game master. Try to tell them that your character should be kind of unreasonably smart, and maybe they're okay with that, or maybe they're going to require that you actually personally can solve all the challenges ahead of you. But that's just a conversation for within your group. And the other thing to focus on is going to be personality. Personality and your ability to convince and charm and persuade and intimidate, and all these things that you have while you're interacting with others. So you can see there's no score to say, well, I'm a very charming individual or anything like that. Again, this is going to fall to how does the player play the character. If the player comes up with convincing reasons for the characters that they're interacting with to listen to them, then those characters should listen to them. If they can't come up with reasonable, convincing words, then, well, the NPCs shouldn't listen to what they have to say. For example, if I'm trying to get a discount, just asking nicely probably isn't enough. But if I offered to do work for that merchant, well, then maybe the merchant is willing to knock down their prices. But the same thing goes. If you want to play a character that is kind of stumbling over their words, probably much like me in making this video, having a hard time speaking, well, you can still play that character if you would like. And if you want your character to be more of a smooth talker, maybe you're just not a very good speaker in real life, that's kind of the escape you want, is to play a character that's better with it. Just let your GM know, hey, I'd like my character to be a little more eloquent, a little bit better with words. Can you just kind of dress it up in your head as I'm speaking to make sure that my character is sounding better than I am? And I think most GMs will go for that. But of course, it's going to be down to your group and how you want to play it. But those are the things that you're really going to be doing outside of combat, generally interacting with people, interacting with the environment. You're going to take attributes into account more often than anything else. Of course, you can take your other things into account. Can I pull or push objects? Or some other characters can do kind of wondrous things with their attack abilities, and those can also be done outside of combat. You can really get creative with it, but the rules are very, very light for it. It's more on kind of how you narrate and how you problem solve than it is any particular score or ability that you have.